I have been fortunate enough to visit the majority of tracks on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. Today, I'm going to put them in a tier list, something I call the Groovy Grid. It has been a long time since my last Groovy Grid video. It's been a long time since I took NASCAR tracks and pitted them against one another. By my count, I've been to 17 active NASCAR Cup Series tracks. That's well more than half. I'll be judging each track mainly based on two factors. One, is the on-track racing product good? Are races here fun to watch? And two, how is the at-track experience, the amenities, the atmosphere, etc.? From there, I will place each track somewhere on this Groovy Grid. The G category, Groovy, is reserved for the best of the best, only the most elite. And there's A, B, C, all the way down to D. I don't have an F because I don't think I can fail any track. I've never had just an objectively bad experience at a NASCAR track before. There's always at least a handful of positives I can point to, but there you go. Let's get started. We're going to begin with my home track, the track I saw my first ever NASCAR Cup Series race at all the way back in 2005, Texas Motor Speedway. Like I just said, I'm not going to fail Texas Motor Speedway. I can't do that to my home track. All you Texas Motor Speedway haters out there refuse to admit that the past couple of years, these races have been kind of interesting, at least. Not great racing. Turns 1 and 2 still extremely sketchy, but unpredictable. The facility does need some upgrades, but I'm a big fan of the Torchy's Tacos they've got there in the infield garage area. So I'll put Texas Motor Speedway in D tier. It's not great, but I'm not gonna fail it. I just can't. Y'all can't make me do it. Let's move on to a classic. I don't think there's any track in NASCAR that gives off more old school charm than Darlington Raceway. A lot of tracks out there need to be touched up, need some renovations, and Darlington probably does too, but it's the one track that I really don't want NASCAR to touch. Fresh coat of paint here or there, that's all you really need. The charm of this place is watching drivers slide up to that outside wall in the center of turns 1, 2, even 3 and 4. It doesn't get old. A tier for Darlington Raceway. Great racing, great atmosphere, especially for the Southern 500. Let's go from one of the oldest tracks in NASCAR to one of the newest. I was at the inaugural Chicago street race this past summer, and despite the record-setting rains, I went home satisfied, and I think most other fans did as well. A great race capped off an otherwise near catastrophic weekend. I'm gonna put Chicago in B tier for now, but I do think it has the opportunity to move up or move down, honestly. Hopefully this next year we get better weather and we can truly see what this racetrack, what this event is capable of. I will say the location is incredible, right in the center of some of Chicago's hottest tourist destinations, plenty of restaurants, shopping, hotels, unbeatable. Let's stick with that new theme for a moment. Another one of NASCAR's recent experiments is the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, the Clash. I've attended both Clash at the Coliseum events as a fan. There's a lot to like here. The track itself looks awesome. NASCAR spared no expense. They built a legitimate racetrack inside of a football stadium. There's not a bad seat in the house. The musical acts the past couple years have, for the most part, I think, hit. But there are some negatives. For one, the on-track racing isn't great. It's a one groove racetrack. The only way to pass is to knock someone out of the way, and the problem we ran into this past year was the leader would get spun out by somebody 4 rows back driving in too hard. It's novel, it's interesting, but it's not actually great racing in my opinion. And while the location is great, not far from downtown Los Angeles, a very central Southern California location, everything as you'd expect is kind of expensive. Parking was expensive. I paid, I think, $7, I'm not proud to admit this, for a bottle of water. Strict bag policy, you can't bring in your own coolers. I think it was like clear bags only. So it's interesting, but I gotta put it in C tier. I'm glad they're doing it another year, but after this season, I would be interested in NASCAR taking the football stadium concept maybe somewhere else. What is the next evolution of this type of event? Because this type of event absolutely has a place in NASCAR's future. This next track doesn't really count as new, although it has been newly renovated, but Speedway Motorsports did a fantastic job getting North Wilkesboro Speedway into NASCAR race shape. So many original structures remain. It's like a blast from the past. They created one of the greatest sports atmospheres I've ever been a part of. Unfortunately, the track-car combo did not result in a great race. Truck race was pretty good, and even the All-Star Open wasn't bad, but the main event left a lot to be desired. I think North Wilkesboro belongs in B tier. Hopefully the inevitable repave unlocks this place's full potential. From one great NASCAR venue to perhaps the great NASCAR venue, Daytona International Speedway. I've long said that if you're going to bring a non-NASCAR fan to any NASCAR race, Daytona is probably your best bet, especially since the Daytona Rising renovations, the concourse, the grandstand area is as modern, as impressive as just about any modern day NFL stadium. And then, of course, around the track, you've got malls, you've got restaurants, there's plenty of amenities. The on-track racing is always great, and I think if you're a new fan, it's pretty easy to follow. Just usually whoever that is ahead of the big pack is in the lead. Big crashes that'll get you out of your seat a couple times per race. Even if you're not a big fan of pack racing, I think just about every NASCAR fan still likes Daytona, or at least appreciates the history, the scale. Daytona is unmatched. It's my favorite track to visit in NASCAR today. I think it's worthy of groovy tier. Talladega Superspeedway is a way of life. Not sure everyone will understand it or appreciate it, but those who do truly understand Talladega's cultural significance. Talladega is worthy of A tier, in my opinion. Racing is very similar to Daytona's. Hasn't been renovated as recently, although the infield garage experience is really great. Doesn't have quite the same amenities nearby, although it is near just off a major interstate, so the location isn't bad. Talladega Boulevard is exactly what the legend describes. Not for everyone, but if it is for you, you're going to have a great time. A tier for Talladega. Circuit of the Americas belongs in A tier as well, our first road course on the list. Beautiful facility, very big facility. Prepare to take a lot of steps. I think the observation tower is a great icon, and what's great is that there are many grandstand seats that allow you to see the majority of the course. You can't say that about most road courses. I highly recommend visiting COTA, even if the racing has been maybe iffy at times. The 2022 finish was dramatic and exciting. This year's race had some great moments with Tyler Reddick ultimately getting the win. But between the rain in 2021 and the turn one terror that was 2023, there's been a lot of crap to wade through as well. It's clear looking at that, tight hairpin turn one that this track was not originally built for stock cars. I hope NASCAR does kind of what they did to the Indy Road Course and the Charlotte Roval, and they move the restart zone back a bit to hopefully clean things up in 2024. But A tier for COTA. Great track. I like Phoenix Raceway more than most. I think the main reason Phoenix catches a lot of flack is because it's hosted the championship, 4 years in a row now? Is it the best championship venue? No, probably not. But the amenities are great. It's close to a major city, only about 30 minutes away from downtown Phoenix. And the fans pack the stands every single year. A great atmosphere, great infield experience. I think that ticket is as worth it as any infield ticket on the schedule. I want to put it in B tier, but the racing has never been great, regardless of generation of car. The Xfinity race this past month was maybe the best race I've seen here in quite some time, but I guess that's not saying a lot. So I'll put Phoenix begrudgingly in C tier. I'm really tempted to put Las Vegas in C tier as well. I mean, kind of like Phoenix, it's not too far from a major city. The facility holds up pretty well. It hasn't been renovated as recently as Phoenix has, but like the Neon Garage, their infield fan experience holds up really well. And the last couple of years with the next gen car racing so well at mile and a halfs, I think that gives Vegas an edge. I'll put Las Vegas in B tier for now, but it's like in B minus tier. I'm really close to dropping it into C. I hate to say it, but this track may be the perfect candidate for just one date a year. I think if you have one date, you pack the grandstands, the atmosphere would be greatly improved. I'll put Nashville Superspeedway in C tier. It's not bad, but it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. I remember traffic the first year I was there was just awful. It's gotten a little bit better since then. They have made improvements to their credit. The main grandstands always have a great atmosphere, but this track still has sort of smaller temporary seating in turns 1 and turns 4. The facility isn't bad, but it is somewhat uninspiring. The racing has been pretty good though, at least the last couple years since the next gen was introduced, so that helps it out. Still, I think Nashville belongs in C tier. Martinsville Speedway. I've never been the biggest Martinsville fan. A lot of folks I think would say it belongs in groovy tier. Not for me. I will put Martinsville in A. I've always preferred tracks with multiple grooves, and Martinsville Speedway, we're talking about location, middle of nowhere. I've been a few times. It's a hard track to get to if you're not a local, but I guess that's the point. This track plays to the locals. It feels like a high school football stadium. You all have heard the many different analogies. There's not a bad seat in the house. It's got a lot going for it. Plenty of iconic Martinsville moments that you can point at and say, hey, you had to be there. I think an A is fair for Martinsville Speedway. They've also got those hot dogs, which they're good, but let's be honest, the real reason people love them is because they're cheap. I want to talk about a track I visited finally for the first time ever this year, Michigan International Speedway. Now, I got to put an asterisk next to this one. I didn't get the full experience. This race was rained out till Monday with the way my flights and work was scheduled. I couldn't stay for the finish, but I did get to see some of the race, and I did get at least some of the pre-race experience. This track, amenity-wise, is very nice. I think it's very well kept up, well maintained. I've heard good things about the surrounding area. I didn't get much of a chance to explore. I'll put Michigan at B, but I think I need to visit again before sort of making a final decision. I've always thought the racing at Michigan was decent. I think with the next gen, it's probably a little better. Battle between Truex and Buescher this past summer was great, so I'll go B for Michigan. I hadn't been to Homestead-Miami Speedway in a while, but I was at the race in October and it kind of blew me away. The racing is obviously great. The next gen car I think makes it look a little better, but you can run anywhere from the painted white line up to the painted blue wall, anywhere in between. The infield garage experience is okay. It's a little cramped, could probably be expanded a bit, but I guess they had to make room for that lake along the back straightaway. It's been painful to see them removing seats seemingly every few years the past, I don't know, decade. I think that's hurt the atmosphere, that's killed the vibe a little bit, so to speak, but without much work, I think Homestead-Miami Speedway would be ready to host championship weekend once again. Like, it felt like a championship venue. Not quite as nice as Phoenix. Again, raving about Phoenix Raceway's amenities, but close. Homestead is not far from Miami, a destination city. I'm going to put Homestead-Miami Speedway in A tier. More than anything, the on-track racing product is arguably the best it's ever been. So I hope NASCAR is able to move this place back into that finale slot sooner rather than later, even if it's just temporary. Just a few more. Pocono Raceway, I got to visit last year for the first time ever. Another track that blew me away. As a kid, I hated Pocono. I loathed the 2 Pocono weekends we were forced to sit through. But I'd always heard it was better in person, and once I got to visit, I got it. I understood. The track may be in a fairly remote location, but the Pocono Mountains are beautiful, and they pull out all the stops for their weekend. Tons of carnival rides, activations outside the track. The camping culture here, from what I could see, is strong, and there have been some very memorable moments on track in recent years, from Blaney getting his first win, Kyle Larson blowing a tire in the final corner this past summer, Larson versus Hamlin. If you'd asked me 10-15 years ago, Pocono probably would have been in D tier, but times have changed and Pocono has aged well. I'll go B tier for the Tricky Triangle. 2 racetracks to go. Let's talk Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I've been to both versions. I've been to the Brickyard 400. It was a long time ago, but I've been there. And I've been to the Indy Road Course race a couple years back. The history of this facility, and Roger Penske obviously owns it now, but the upkeep has been fantastic. A very nice track to visit. Great location, of course, not far from the city, from Indianapolis. Whether we're talking road course or oval, I think Indy slots into the B tier currently. I know it's, I think, closed for renovations for the next year or so, but once it reopens, I highly recommend checking out the IMS Museum there between turns 1 and 2. Really cool place with some really cool people who work there. So a lot of great things to do, to see, to explore at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But now we've made it to the final track On the current NASCAR Cup Series schedule that I visited, Bristol Motor Speedway. I've not been to Bristol Dirt. We're just talking about normal concrete Bristol. Bristol Dirt's not even on the schedule anymore. It's not even an active track anymore, technically. Bristol Motor Speedway is kind of the opposite of Daytona in every single way. Daytona's recently renovated. Bristol kind of feels old. Daytona is a 2.5-mile super speedway. Bristol is a fifth the size, a little bull ring. One is on the coast of Florida, not far from big cities like Orlando, Jacksonville. The other is in the mountains of Tennessee, fairly remote. The tracks could not be more different, but they are equally incredible. Bristol belongs in G tier, groovy tier. At Bristol, you are on top of the action. Not a bad seat in the house. From your seat, it doesn't look like the place could even fit 40 race cars, but somehow they do barely, and that's what leads to the aggressive door slamming action we all love. I said Daytona is where you take the new fan who doesn't know hardly anything about NASCAR. Bristol is where you go if you are a hardcore NASCAR fan and you haven't had the chance to visit before. Traditional NASCAR country, hardcore NASCAR culture there. Highly recommend you visit Bristol Motor Speedway if you've been watching the sport for a long time and have never made the trip. Bristol is in G tier alongside Daytona. We had to end on a high note, on a positive note. There you go, the groovy grid. I know there are a lot of tracks I haven't been to, unfortunately. Hopefully I'll get to visit Kansas this next year, maybe even Iowa. They've added Iowa to the Cup schedule. Might have to make the trip. Atlanta's one I still can't believe I haven't been to. I feel like I've been through Atlanta or that part of the country so many times. I don't know how that one's slipped off my radar, but we'll have to get out to Atlanta sooner rather than later. Let me know if you agree with my ranking of your favorite track. If I didn't get to ranking your favorite track, stay tuned, because in the next couple of years, hopefully we'll add a few more to this list and I'll have to update my groovy grid. But thank you all so much for watching this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new to the channel and love all things NASCAR. We talk NASCAR almost every single day, even during the off season. And a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters as well. I will see you all again soon. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, folks.